Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's talk. It's a pleasure for me to both introduce and welcome Dr. Selvakumar as the speaker today. So just to give a very brief introduction, Dr. Kumar is a faculty at the Tamil University in Biology, history, heritage management, maritime history, maritime history and archaeology, archaeological theory, heritage management, history of science and technology, Indian Ocean cultural interactions, and ecocentric criticism. He is a recipient of many prestigious awards, including the Nehru Trust for Indian Collections at the Victoria and Albert Museum, through which he was a visiting researcher at the Center for Maritime Archaeology at Southampton University. Besides this, he's published in various national and international journals, and there are many of his articles which anybody who's worked on megaliths like myself have cited often, and other topics as well. So it's a great pleasure for me to invite him today for this talk and welcome him to start his talk.
So can I start now?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah. Good evening to you all. First of all, I would like to thank INTACH and NIAS and Smriti and Aarti for making this arrangement and inviting me to make a presentation. Today, I'm going to talk about early Tamil literature and urbanization in South India. My focus will be mainly on Tamil Nadu and Kerala, what is known as Tamil. So my focus is only on these two states, though I labeled my presentation as South India. Now I will start my PowerPoint with screen sharing now. We have limited time, we have a lot of slides to share. I will try to finish everything within 45 minutes. Yeah, the title of this, my presentation, as I said, is Literary Sources and Urbanization in South India. This presentation is divided into 5 sections, and it mainly targets the general audience. There may be some technical terms which I will explain in between wherever it is necessary. So we need to understand the cultural space and time that we are dealing with here. What I call as a time slice. So we are mainly focusing here in the period between 500 BCE to 300 CE, which is otherwise known as early historic period in South India, or otherwise also known as Sangam age, because for this period we have evidence in the form of early Tamil literature. But we have also...
Sir, Selva, can I just interrupt for a minute? Selva? Your audio is crackling. Your audio is crackling a lot, which it was not earlier. Can you adjust your mic or something?
Okay. Even I think, I don't know what, is it okay now?
No, it's still crackling a lot.
Yes? Is my audio okay now?
Not
I hope my audio is okay.
No, actually,
so we are dealing with...
Sir, it's not really. Can we try one thing? Can you switch off your video? Maybe that will help.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Yeah, I'll try doing that. Can I just stop video? Okay. Yeah. So we are dealing with the period of early historic, as I said. The period before early historic is known as Iron Age. That is roughly falling between 1000 BCE and 500 BCE. This period is also known as megalithic phase, mainly the Iron Age. And in the early historic, we have a number of developments which are collectively labeled as urbanization. And also, we are dealing with the cultural space of Tamilagam and also the region beyond what I would otherwise call as Afro-Eurasian world. This particular area or the cultural landscape covers from East Africa down to Europe, Asia as a whole, within which ancient Tamilagam had active cultural interaction in the early historic period. This particular space and interactions are otherwise called as Indo-Roman trade, Indian Ocean trade, Silk Route, Maritime Silk Route, Bay of Bengal sphere, India, Southeast Asia interaction, Mediterranean Red Sea. There are so many small interaction spheres which can be collectively called as Afro-Eurasian world. And as I said, we are focusing on the area of Tamilagam. Coming to the research on this particular phase, early historic, that is between 500 BCE to 300 CE, we have several publications by scholars like Warmington, Wheeler, Neelganda Sastry, Chambak Lakshmi, K.B. Raman, Vimla Begley. Recently, Rajan Gurukal and K. Rajan, they have published on the external context. There are several works by Tamil scholars and mainly Chambak Lakshmi and Rajan Gurukal and Tamil scholars who are dealing with the Tamil literature on the cultural aspect of this period. And coming to the Iron Age, I thought I will show you some of the archaeological remains of the Iron Age. We have these kind of megalithic burials, what you see in this image as dolmens, umbrella stones of Kerala, and sarcophagus and menhir, cyst burials. These were the remains of the Iron Age period, otherwise known as megalithic period. We also get a lot of urn burials. On top, you see a sarcophagus that is from Andhra Pradesh. We have urn burials, a lot of cornelian beads, iron objects. They are found in many of the megalithic burials. So these megalithic burials were actually began in the Iron Age. People started building these burials in the Iron Age, but they continued in the early historic period because we get a lot of references to these burials in the early Tamil literature. Now, after the Iron Age, we come to the early historic period, which was characterized by urbanization. In the Iron Age, we primarily deal with the agropastoral communities, and these communities were exchanging in between among themselves as depicted in the literature in the fivefold landscapes. You must be familiar with the Kurinji, Marudam, Mullai, Neidal, Palai as the fivefold landscapes of the ancient Tamilakam. So these kind of interactions in the Iron Age laid the foundation for the early historic period, which we call the developments in this period is called as urbanization. What happened in this period is that we have evidence for non-kinship based political formation. That means we had something called a tribe within court kind of political system in the Iron Age, and probably chiefdoms. That was another kind of political formation. In the Iron Age, some of these formations developed into non-kinship. That means the chiefs were chiefs or vendors, mainly what is described in the Sangam literature as Muvendas, mainly Chera, Choda, Pandya. They were non-kinship based political formation. They emerged in the early historic period. There are also debates whether there was state as a political formation existed in the early historic time, or it was just a chiefdom. There are a lot of debates. I prefer the term political formation because state is a very heavily loaded concept. We also have evidence of writing and evidence of long distance interaction within the Afro-Eurasian world. And we have evidence for introduction of coins, and lot of proliferation of craft and industrial productions in these urban centers. We are using the term urban in a very limited sense. because urban has different meanings in different contexts. When we talk about Harappan urbanization, that was different, and early historic urbanization was something different from the medieval period. Again, what we had in the late medieval was very different. Colonial period urbanization was very different. Even the kind of urbanization we had in 1960s and 70s in the last century was different from what we have now. So urbanization is the term that we use within certain limitation. We cannot directly treat all the urban centers were same. The urban centers of ancient period were much different from the urban centers of 18th, 19th, 20th centuries. That we should keep in mind. But however, when we look at all the settlements of the early historic period, we can see certain patterns, certain variations in the settlements. And even if you look at the native people's understanding as reflected in the literature, we get to know that some of these settlements could be definitely called as urban centers. This particular map is from Professor Rajan. He has plotted all the megalithic sites in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. You can see the number of settlements and burial sites filled all over Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And when you look at the Sangam literature also, you find people living in all 5 or the 4-fold landscapes, very clearly suggesting this region was very thickly populated. I told you about the introduction of script. We have evidence of script coming from the pottery. On pottery shirts, people have written their names, like what we do when we go to office. In the different box, we write our name. These people have written their names on the pottery. We get that. And in addition to that, we also get names on the coins. In some of the rock shelters, which are found near Madurai and in other area, there are Tamil Brahmi inscription specifying the names of the traders and also the Shramana monks who were residing. So we get very clear evidence for the introduction of the script. This was found near Chidambaram, and this reads Adiyakan, and this was found near Ramanathapuram. We have a ring with Brahmi, Tamil Brahmi or Tamili inscriptions. And these are the sources for understanding the early historic period. We have foreign accounts like Strabo's geography, Periplus, Pliny's natural history, Ptolemy's geography, Musiri's papyrus, and Chariton play, comedy play, and Pythagorean table. So you might have read all these in the textbook. I'll not dwell much upon these. And this is the Pythagorean table, which was a map of Roman time. You can see Sri Lanka depicted here, Musiri's, and this was the part of southern part of India. And then you have Lacus Musiri's, Templum Augusti. Probably Musiri's was here. This is one of the earliest maps depicting about India and Tamil region. Now we are coming to the ports and hinterland centers. These developed in this particular period. Actually, these settlements existed in the Iron Age, and they become a sort of urban centers. A kind of network emerged. Network is basically the connections, what we have now in the modern day. When you want to travel to Chicago or San Francisco, you go to Gulf or you go to Hong Kong and travel, you know, such kind of trade networks or exchange network were established in the early historic times. Several ports emerged right from Red Sea down to South China Sea, and these ports were well connected through maritime routes and navigation, for which we have a lot of evidence. And within Tamil Nadu also, we have these 5-fold landscapes where several settlements existed. People were moving, and there were social networks, economic or commercial networks, and political networks where the vendors were busy fighting with the chiefs, trying to, you know, plunder, and also trying to take control over territories and urban landscapes. There also existed cultural or ideological networks which are evidenced by the rock shelters with the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions in which beds are carved and Shramana monks were existing. Probably on the east coast there existed a Buddhist network linking Andhra Pradesh and Kaveri Pumbatinam and Sri Lanka. Several networks existed in this period. And we also get to know about the forts and hinterland centers and their characters. These are reflected in literature, Sangam literature as well, and also in the archaeological context. We have, as the map shows, we have evidence of Kanchipuram, Vasavasamudram airport, Arikamedu airport, and then Kavarikumpattinam airport, Adahankulam airport, Korkai airport excavated, and Pattanam. And in the hinterland, we have Perur, Kodumanal, and Karur, Urayur here, the Choda capital, Urayur, and this is Karur, the capital of Cheras. Cheras had probably two capitals. This is Madurai. Madurai is here. This is Tikalupati. Kiradi, which is excavated recently, is here. Adahankulam. So you had a lot of settlements, some of which could be called as urban centers. I have marked many of the urban centers here. And then we also get smaller settlements. How can we call these settlements as urban centers? Because as archaeologists, we explore, we estimate their size, and also we excavate. So I have classified these sites into two categories. If you look at the literature, Tamil literature talks about Sirur, Sirugudi, Perur, and these kind of bigger towns. Valam Kedum series, that is the adjective they use for the bigger towns. So you get evidence for these urban centers and smaller settlements in archaeology as well as in literature. This is one site I excavated near Madurai. This is called Papinayakanpatti. It's a very small settlement. We did not find any other objects. We put two trial trenches. We found mainly animal bones and very few beads. But on the surface, interestingly, we found fine roulated ware. Roulated ware is a pottery that indicates the early historic long distance connection. This pottery was probably produced in Bengal region. That has been proved based on XRD analysis, a kind of technique used for understanding the properties of clay and comparing them with the potsherds so that the exact source of the clay could be identified. And also two potsherds with Brahmi, Tamil Brahmi was identified, collected from this site by me. So these kind of sites existed in the remote area. This particular site was is located 150 kilometers from the coast. Then this is category 2 sites which are classified as regional headquarters. This I did it based on my research in the lower Kaveri Valley. Interestingly, these early historic settlements in the medieval period, they became Nadu. Nadu as a territorial headquarters. If you see Sangam literature, you get important settlements like Avur, Kirar. These settlements are associated with Kirar, Avur, Kovur. And later on, these settlements become medieval Nadu headquarters. And at these sites, Devaram temples are located. So I excavated some of these sites and found interesting evidence that these settlements extend back to the Iron Age. Interestingly, at these settlements, we also find Devaram or Tamil Padal Petra Sthalams. So I raised the question, why a particular Devaram temple has to be located in an area? Because to locate a temple in an area, there should be people and there should be some importance to that particular settlement. That is why we have these Devaram temples only at 274 sites in South India. If you go and find nearby these temples, if you look at the inscription, you definitely find evidence for early historic settlement. So my argument is that whatever settlements had occupation in the Iron Age, they became the important centers in the medieval period. They became the administrative headquarters of Nadu, and they also became the sites of Devaram and Divya Prabandham settlements. This is another site I excavated where I found this is a Vaishnavite Sthalam temple site near Mayiladurai. This is known as Nangur. This settlement is also mentioned in the Sangam text and later Sangam text. And here we found a lot of evidence. This is evidence, glass beads, and we also found an iron working context in the early historic times. And those sites are category 2. And then category 3 urban centers. Sites like Arikamedu, Pattanam, I showed in the previous map. Kiradi, Urayu. These settlements acted as ports in the coastal context, ports as well as markets, and the hinterlands, they were the political headquarters, and also they were functioning as markets and industrial production centers. For example, Arikamedu. Interestingly, at all these settlements, you find a lot of evidence for this brick architecture. They are extended over a large area. So now we see a map of Tamil Nadu with the important port site like Arikamedu, Kaveri Pumpattinam, Adahankulam, Korkai, and Pattanam. Musri's Pattanam site excavated by KCHR is identified with Musri's or Musri. And the site of Sindhis, Bekkare, Belita, they have not been identified. So what I am going to show now is the images from the excavations, and that will help you to identify the archaeological or material characteristics of these urban centers. I'll just quickly go through because we don't have much time. This is Arikamedu site, and these are the brick architecture. In the early historic time, all these urban centers acted as a kind of industrial production centers, and people were producing different kinds of crafted goods. We have evidence of brick architecture. Here you can see a drainage. Probably people were producing textile, and then they were producing several goods. And this site was excavated by Wheeler and also Casal, a French scholar, later on by the American team. And this is the view of Arikamedu. This is a 18th century mission house, and this is how the site exists. It was the photographs taken in 1892 during the excavation by Vimala Begley, where you can see some of these. On the left side, you see a brick wall of Chola period or medieval period. On the right side, you see a brick structure of early historic time. You see the post holes and the bricks. And these bricks are of early historic period. They measure by 40 centimeter by 20 roughly, and then 5 to 6 centimeter in thickness. These kind of brick structures appeared in the urban centers, what I earlier called as category 3 sites. We get evidence of Indian rouletted ware. I mentioned earlier, this rouletted ware is found from Bernike in Egypt and also Qusayr al-Qadim in Egypt near Red Sea, then down to Wokio in Vietnam. So you find this pottery in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and all over in Thailand and everywhere. So this particular pottery is an evidence for Indian connection with the entire Afro-Eurasian world. And further below, you see amphora. Amphora was a kind of wine jar that was mainly produced in the Western world, in Egypt and Roman Empire region, in Italy and other area, Greek and other area. And people brought Roman wine, and these vessels or Roman ships and also Roman wine are referred to in the early literature. We have evidence of ring well in these urban centers, evidence for shell bangle making. You get actual shell bangle and cut product, and also in the literature you find a description. You find here you see a stamp of a chariot seal and Tamil Brahmi, gold ornaments, gold working took place. All these in all these centers, glass bead making happened. And also several other sites were also associated. I told you about these megalithic burials. Some of the megalithic burials were contemporary. This is from Muthirapalayam. They found gold spacer from a burial at Muthirapalayam. You find a lot of gold jewelry. Probably the gold for these ornaments came from the Indian Ocean or Indo-Roman trade. This was found at Sutukeni. And Adahankulam was another important site excavated by state archaeology. Here you find a Sri Lankan Brahmi in Sri Lankan Prakrit. It reads as Samutaha, Roman amphora from Adahankulam, coins of Valentine period from Adahankulam, and the Terra Sigillata. Here you can see, interestingly, a stamped image showing a lady with African features carrying an amphora. In front of that is a man holding a kind of lamp, which sometimes is associated with the Jewish religion. And this lamp has, I think, 7 branches. So this symbolism we do not know what it means, but definitely it indicates the external connection. Another ship graffiti from Arahankulam, evidence for stone bead making, glass bead, and this is from Kidadi. This was excavated by Archaeological Survey of India. Again, you find these kind of brick structures and ring wells. This is from Kidadi, from Amarnath's excavation. Blackened earthenware at the lower level, and fish symbol, which is typically found associated with the Pandyans. Some of them are also found on the Pandyan coins. And this is ivory dice and another quartz ear ornament. And next we will come to Pattanam, the site of Pattanam. This was excavated by KCHR jointly with P.J. Cherian and K.P. Shawjan and Preetha Nair and other researchers. I'll show some of these images. For long, there has been debate about the location of the ancient Musiris. Our excavations at the site of Pattanam brought out a lot of important information, helping us to understand the urban character of that particular town. It has been identified with Musiris, but there are debates. It is not necessary that this was Musiris. In fact, this could be part of Musiris. Probably Musiri or Musiri refer to the entire region of the Periyar Delta, of which this is one particular important settlements. We have possibly evidence of late Iron Age, early historic, early medieval, but then we have a gap in the settlement. Again, we find modern remains. This is how archaeologists classify the settlement history. And here you can see the various cultural period. Archaeologists excavate a site, analyze the material, create various cultural periods, and then date the material. And this is the excavated trench. You can see 3-meter deposit right at the bottom. You can see higher sand content, very limited evidence for occupation. As we move further, intensive brick building and other activities led to the changes in the soil and the soil deposition. That is what you see here, a brick building that was excavated at Pattanam along with the jar. These potteries are called as turquoise glazed pottery, probably from Iran, Iraq, and Egyptian region, and it is not local. What you see on the left were found in the excavation. On the right, you see these complete specimens. These are the same varieties. I just wanted to show you these images. Again, shards of West Asian torpedo jars with black bitumen. They were all, part of the traded goods. Probably the jars were brought with wine or other products. Finally, they were discarded at the site of Pattanam, which archaeologists excavated. Then you have amphora shards. Amphora, were the jars mainly used for importing wine and olive oil and also fish sauce. But looking at these pottery, we can clearly make out whether they are Indian or non-Indian. But then we undertake XRD or thin section analysis to identify from where they are coming from. So these are the materials excavated from this site of Pattanam. Again, terra sigillata, Italian or Eastern Mediterranean pottery. And then we have rouletted ware. Almost a complete dish was found at the site. Evidence for bead making, stone beads, glass beads, and their waste, and lot of chips, cameo blanks, and Roman glass, and iron nails, Chera copper coins, and lead coins, and gold ornaments. Gold working also took place in all these centers. If you look at the literature, you get very clear evidence. Here you can see a gold ornament component in the shape of an amphora, very clearly suggesting that trade connectivity. So definitely about 2000 years ago, probably from 1st century BC onwards, people were interacting intensively, people were moving across, and ideas were moving, material culture were moving. That we see in archaeological evidence, for which we see in archaeological record as well as in the literary texts. And then you get evidence for these Brahmi. These are all 18th and 19th century blue and white Chinese pottery that was excavated. Interestingly, we found a beautiful wharf context at Pattanam, where we found a boat, a canoe made out of single log of wood. This was made of Anjali tree, and then we also found bollards which were placed by the side of the wharf so that the canoes will not be damaged when they land near the banks, and such wharfs are described in Sangam literature. We find a comparison of a wharf, wharf and the boats with the stable image horses were tied. So that kind of comparison occurs in the literature. We have warehouses, brick structures, and a lot of things from these are from the sites of Pattanam, ring wells, and triple grooved roof tiles. Triple grooved roof tiles were introduced for the first time. Socket jars probably used as toilet pits, human bones, frankincense. Probably they could have come from, from the site of Sumuram or Korori in Oman. And we also have evidence for local frankincense. We have all these organic remains: teak, anjali, chiretta, coconut, and then pepper, seeds of grapes, anjali, and also wheat, rice. So many things were recovered from a waterlogged conducts at the Pattanam. They clearly tell about the trade activities that took place at the sites. This is again a terra sigillata. This was a Fortuna intaglio found at the site of Pattanam, typically influenced by Roman or Western context. It's not a local product. And amphora and cornelian ball, you get a lot of material culture. Actually, an archaeological site is a record. Normally, we think of record only as a book. But in fact, the entire India, we have evidence of history buried on the landscape. At some villages, we have thicker evidence. Actually, if you excavate each and every village in India, you will find something, either 100 years or 200 or 2000 or 3000 years. So this is a form of record which contains material culture. By digging this, we can reconstruct the history, and at the same time, we can also bring in development in some context through cultural tourism or heritage management, and also we can promote education. So this is one way of bringing in development and education and understanding among the communities. These are glass beads from Pattanam, and again we have an intaglio of lion and copper coin. You see another gold ornament segment, probably appended from Pattanam. It is in the form of an axe, probably a local design. Lot of materials you get, if you do anything in a particular settlement, definitely you leave an evidence. That is what archaeology is about. Archaeologists are like detectives. They reconstruct the activities based on the evidence. That's what archaeologists do. So we have a lot of archaeological sites. By carefully excavating, we can recover a lot of remains that will be useful for reconstructing history. This one is a spindle hole. Probably this was used for textile, making thread out of cotton. This was excavated at the site of Pattanam. You get a lot of such material. This particular image shows the complete view of the canoe excavated. Again, all these pottery I showed you. So these are the bits and fragments of materials that we get from an archaeological site, and then using that we reconstruct the cultural history and the interaction trade networks. Then I'm coming to the third part of my presentation. Here I'm talking about the interactions with South Asian networks, how Tamilagam interacted. We get evidence in the form of rouletted ware, which was probably produced in Bengal, and 50% of the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions, they are in Prakrit. They suggest people from northern part of India, other area moved, and also people from Sri Lanka, they came to the Tamilagam region. We get these kind of pottery with the stamp impression. They are very similar to those found in Bengal. We have evidence of, as I said already, Sri Lankan connection. We have, lot of connections and interactions happening. This was a coin found from Arikemedu, from surface context. So they definitely indicate the connections. Now we'll come to the long distance connection. This is the map I wanted to show you. Here you can see the entire from East Africa, and this entire region was connected. So we need to study Indian history in two contexts. One context, the evidence found in India. In another context, the evidence found in entire Afro-Eurasian world. We should treat it as one region and try to get evidence for the connectivity. I'll show you some of the important evidence. This map shows the site of Bernike. They found three Tamil Brahmi inscriptions. These are from the site of Qusair al-Qadim. One is reading as Kanan, Satan, and Panay Ori. And these pottery, they are from Egypt. They are typically Indian pottery. These are from Bernike. There's a pottery with the name Kotra Puman, inscribed on an amphora, and then 2 pottery jars with 7.5 kilo pepper were found at this site. And also some of the Indian pottery. You can ask, how do you find the Indian pottery? How do you distinguish foreign pottery from Indian pottery at a site? It is very easy in any archaeological site. For a layman's understanding, suppose in our classroom, let's say there is a person from Africa, a person from China, person from, let's say, Europe. They are sitting together. To some extent, we can pinpoint from which region they could have been. You know, there are almost complexities involved in. At least you can make out these are, you know, the same way when you are studying lakhs and lakhs of pottery, we'll be able to, by using our naked eye observation, we'll be able to distinguish and sort. And again, we also use the idea of typology. The shapes of pottery produced in a particular region, at least in the ancient time, they have a particular characteristics, shape of the rim. If you look at the pottery produced in Kerala, the bronze vessels of Tamil Nadu and Kerala will be different. The vessel forms of Andhra, Rajasthan, if you say the water jar used for taking, you know, the bronze vessels used for taking water will be entirely different. Same way you taste achar or sambar made in all these regions, they have their unique signature. Same way we look at the material culture, the same idea is used in epigraphy also. Paleographic studies, the script changes from, you know, say 1st century BC to 4th century CE, and then 6th, 7th, you know, there is some kind of changes in type that we use it for dating initially. Later on, the pottery is subjected to scientific analysis. We have evidence, all these evidence as showed from the site of Bernike, coconut, pepper, rouleted ware, Tamil Brahmi inscription. This is the site of, you know, Kor Rory, what was known as Sumuram. This site, they found a pottery inscription reading Nandai Kiran. It could be the name Kannandai, very typically Tamil. This is a gold touchstone found in Thailand. This reads, you know, Pirtan Kal. And this is from Thailand. I'll skip. We also have evidence for contacts with the other region. Now I'll come to the Sangam literature. We have Sangam text. I have just 10 minutes. I will zoom through my lecture. Sangam literature, you know, these texts are generally dated between 3rd century BC to 3rd century CE. There are debates on their chronology.
Selva?
Yes. Yes.
Selva, can I,
yes?
you can take 15 minutes. It's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I have more slides. I'll rush through. So we have these texts which offer a lot of information on the cultural base of the life, but there are debates also on their chronology, and their internal chronology has not been worked out. Some scholars tend to date some of these texts to a slightly later period. However, definitely they are in the early 1st millennium CE. At least many of these poems and these 8 anthologies, Ettu Thokai and Pattu Pattu, they are very important. They talk about the ways of life and also about yamanas and entire kind of activities that took place in the early historic time. They supplement the evidence found in archaeology and also in Tamil inscriptions. You find some beautiful terms like Agol Pusal in the Puliman Bombay hero stone inscription. The same term is described in the literature. This Akananuru 149 poem is very interesting because it mentions about the fine ships of Yamanas that came into the river Periyar, beating the white foam with metal and gold. You know, Yavanar Thanda Vinaiman Nankalam Unnadu Vandu Kariyodu Payarum Balam Kedu Musiris. This term Balam is very important. And also wine of Yavanas offered in metal cups to the Pandyan king is spoken in from 56 poem. Now, as I said earlier, there is a concept of emic and etic. As archaeologists, you know, we categorize settlement into urban and rural, or as I presented earlier, category 1, 2, 3, like, you know, what we have Mahanagar Palika, you know, district headquarters, village, hamlet, and urban center, metropolitan center. Today, people also had settlements as Sirukudi, Sirur, Perur, that we find in the literature. And interestingly, the suffix Pattinam or Pattanam probably occurs in the Iron Age context or later in early historic. They are all invariably ports. You get reference to Pattanam in Arthasastra, for example, Kaveri Pattinam, and we have the site of Pattanam. These were important ports. They were a category of settlements. The site of Arikamedu has Virampattinam nearby. So when you look at these terms, clearly we understand that Sangam literature shows a lot of site settlement classification. And the ports of Tamilagams are also spoken in the literature. For example, Korkai, the pearl from Korkai is spoken. Agam 24 talks about the shell bangle cutting Brahmins. Vela Parpan Valaran Dumitta Valai. Vala is a bangle. And Thondi is spoken as belonging to Chera kings in Natinai. Virai Munturai, which is identified with Arikamedu, or near Ariyanguppam, and also Virampattinam in Nagam 206. Virai Venman is spoken in 1952. And you also have reference to Yamana lamps. Yamana lamps in the form of a lady carrying a 5-wicker vessel. You know, Yamanar Yetiya Vinayman Pavai Kayend Ayehal Niraya. You know, that kind of description. And also we have in Nedinal Wadai, there are references to these Yamana soldiers. Building a camp. And also there are very beautiful descriptions of these Yamanas, how they were Valipunar Yake, very well built, one kan Yamanar, very fierce eyes, these kind of descriptions. Purananu 343, I'll explain little later. Akananuru 149, I wanted to explain this in detail because this is a beautiful poem. Most of the time, what researchers do, some of the students do, they just take 2 lines and talk. But if you look at the entire poem, you get a beautiful idea. So in this particular poem, the poet says that it describes the hero, the mindset of the hero and the heroine. And that time, people were traveling a lot, as we saw in the previous slides, that people were traveling as far as Egypt down to Southeast Asia. That this particular poem mentions that the hero is not willing to travel the risky highway in which bears destroy the termite, eating their, getting their termites as their food with their entire, entire crowd of bears. And the hero has to cross such a risky highway to earn wealth. So he says, I will not travel such a long distance, leaving my lady love, even if you offer the wealth of Musiris. That is what, described in this poem. Even if you offer rare material wealth, Aridisai Vilupurul Yelidin Perinum. So even if you offer the rare, the wealth earned by a lot of efforts, by taking risk and crossing the highway, I will not leave my lady love and come. And here the same poem has this. So in order to describe the importance of this particular wealth, the poet goes on describing the ships of Yavanas came beating the white foam, which I already said, where the Pandyan king came and attacked the town and recovered an image, Padimam Vavya. We don't know what the Pandyan king. And also here, the particular poems compares the flowers found in the pond of Tiruppanangundram, and that is being compared to the heroine's eye. So he says that he will not, allow the drips appear in the eyes of the lady love, which resemble the flowers in the pond of the Tiruppanangundram near Madurai. So that idea is brought out here in Puram 343. The boats called Ampi, they were actually exchanging fish for paddy, and the paddy is heaped on the boat, and then the houses were filled with pepper bags. So these boats with all these heaps of paddy, they resembled the houses with the pepper bags. The houses with pepper bags resembled the boats with rice heap. So that kind of idea is brought out by that. Here in this particular poem, the cultural life around the Musiris town is described. Kalam Tanda Porparisam Kaditonian Karaichakandu, the gold metal gifts that came by the ships were brought by the smaller boats. That is a very important idea. But recently, some of these poems has been revised by some scholar based on re-looking at the original palm leaf manuscripts. We will not go into that detail. Malaitharamum, Kadaltharamum. Here, the Kutuvan, the Chera king, gets all the goods that were coming from the hills and from the sea, and he was donating to the people. He was at the town of Musiri, which was very close to the sea. So here, the context of this poem is a chief who says that he will not give his daughter in his marriage to somebody who is not a Purayan, even if you offer the wealth of Musris. That is a central idea. What do we get from this? We get this idea that these people were not respecting the money or wealth. So people had some kind of ideology. They did not like the wealth brought up by the new economy at that point of time. That idea is brought out in the paper. So another poem from Pattinapalai explains the network that talks about, Neerin Vanda Nimibari Puravium, the majestic or swift horses that came through the sea, black pepper bags that were carried by animals, gems and gold that came from northern hills, sandal and aloe from the western hills, pearls from southern sea, coral from the eastern sea, goods from Ganga, and commodities from the Kaveri. So here, and also food from Idathu Unavum, Kadagathu Akavum, the food from Sri Lanka, and product of Kadagam, that is Kedah in Sri Lanka. So here, in Malaysia. So this particular idea is very important. So, this idea of network very beautifully, brought out by this poet of Pattinapalai, where he brings out, like if you see any of the charts of modern day, where flight connectivity linking all these ports, all these airports across the globe, this poet here, he brings out the connectivity of Kaveri Pumpattinam in this particular Pattinapalai. So that is very important. So here from this poem, we can understand the network. Then conception of wealth and economy, how these ideas are described in the literature. Valam Kedu Musiris, rare wealth, they occur very frequently. Sometimes women are compared to cities and towns. We don't know why. Vanchi is compared, Vanchi, Marungur, Pattinam, and also Marandai or Mandai, which is identified with the port in northern part of Kerala. They are all compared to women. So this is one of the rhetorics used in the Sangam poem. And also, we get a lot of evidence for craft production. I'll quickly go through within 5 minutes. We get evidence for pottery making, Kalanche Kove. This is a beautiful poem in which a lady's condition is described. She says that, oh Potter, I came all along this way in this very lonely trade route. In the way I lost my husband, kindly make an urn huge enough to place both of us inside. So she expresses her condition like, I came like a lizard sticking to the wheel of a cart. So that idea is very beautifully brought out, and thadi and bricks, they are described in the literature. Weaving and also parthi pender, women especially weaving, that is brought out in some of the poems, and tools used for weaving. The nature of glass, smoke like fine textile, blue cloths which are similar to those like the membrane found inside the bamboo. They are all spoken in the literature. We have evidence of cloth from Kodumanal, spindle hole, and possibly tanks used for dyeing, iron smelting, Karankai Kollan, the blacksmith's hand was dark, and bellow, and anvil is spoken, iron objects, and copper bronze working, kamiyas are spoken in Natinai, and we have evidence of these coins, which I already showed you, bronze objects from megalithic burial, jewelry making, that is spoken. Kodumanal was one important settlement, and these we saw already, people were making all these settlements, cameo, and these objects were imported, of course, the iron objects. And we have evidence of Perumpatan Kal. Patan means goldsmith. This was found in Thailand. And then we have shell bangle. Walking people were cutting shell bangle. This is evidence from the site of Adahankulam. Other specialists like womeners. Womeners are salt. Salt was one important commodity, and these women were traveling. The women folk, they were moving across. They were selling salt, and they are beautifully narrated. Shell working Brahmins, Vela Parpan, Valarandu Mithavalai. So, when you look at this literature, you get a beautiful narration and you understand what it means urban and how people had these particular concepts among them. That is why we need to look at the literature and the meaning of the terms. When you look at the literature, the meaning may not be the same. The term that was used in Sangam age or in the medieval age or even today, they may not have the same meaning. So when we combine archaeology and literature, we are able to better understand the cultural context. In that way, Sangam texts are very useful in understanding the evidence found from archaeological context. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope I have explained everything within this limited time. Thank you.
Selva, that was a wonderful journey, like 800 or more years of history and literature compressed into 40 minutes. I know it's a difficult task, but it was really, really eye-opening in many, many, many ways. And I'm sure many of us would love to hear much more, but perhaps not today. So there are a lot of questions. Let me start with Guganesan Ilavarsan, who wants to know.
Sir? Yeah, can I? Yes, there is some disturbance in the audio. Okay, yeah, tell me. Now maybe I'll switch off my video. Yeah, right. No,
okay.
It's the same almost, I think.
Yeah, it's nice to see you know, sir, when you're talking.
Okay.
Yeah. So Guganesan wants to know what.
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
What were there any Neolithic period practices, social or infrastructural planning, anything like that, that we can still see in the early historic period that you spoke about?
No, we don't get much evidence for Neolithic in Tamil Nadu, except in some northwestern part of Tamil Nadu. But we can understand the Neolithic way of life by looking at the Mullai landscape, how the pastoralists lived. They help us to understand. In addition to that, when we reconstruct history, most of the time we rely upon only on archaeology and literature. To some extent, people are very cautious about literature. If you want to understand history, it is very important that we undertake ethnographic research, and also we look into oral tradition, but cautiously. So by looking at the Mullai landscape that is described in the Sangam literature, we can really compare the Neolithic way of life, but we have to be cautious. We cannot assume that people's life was very static from the Neolithic down to modern period, but there were some changes, but we could see some kind of similarities. So therefore, the Mullai poems describing the Mullai landscape can help us to understand the pastoral way of life.
Okay. Linked to what you just spoke about, Sonal Karanjikar wants to know a little bit more about the fivefold landscape of Tamilagam.
Yeah, the fivefold landscapes are called Kurinchi, Marudam, Mullai, and Neidal and Palai. These were poetic concepts. It is not necessary that people who lived in these landscapes were conscious. If you look at the poets and the poets of Sangam age and their poems, you can very clearly understand these people were well versed with the cultural life. So this category of Kurinchi is the hilly area. The hilly area had a different kind of ways of like punam cultivation, and Mullai is the forested area, where forested in the sense not very rainforest, a simple kind of forest where pasture with pastures, where pastoral life was predominant. Mardam was the wetland, and which refers to the riverine delta. Naidal is obviously the coastal areas where trade, fishing and salt were produced. And Palai is the dry area. Palai is not strictly a kind of category, it is seasonal. Again, the idea of season is important. Mullai becomes Palai in the summer area. So Palai is not strictly a kind of landscape, it changes according to the season. Mullai becomes Palai. So these are the 5 landscapes that poets perceived these variation and the product from their own understanding. So it was a native classification used by the poets for their poetic purpose. So obviously, if you go to coastal area, you get a lot of fish, salt, and these variation in the products led to the cultural interactions. So that was also observed by the poets. That is the idea of this 5 Tinai landscapes. Right.
Okay. Okay. Ankita Salyan wants to know, was the early historic urbanization of South India influenced by urbanization in Ganga Valley, or was it entirely independent?
We cannot, I think it is very complex. What I have argued is that this urbanization of South India was influenced by multiple factors, mainly by the internal factors that happened, and with a kind of top over by external connectivity, not necessarily Ganga Valley, entire South Asia and the Afro-Eurasian world. So you can clearly see the variation in the material cultural production. So in a sense, for the settlements of the interior, what I am trying to argue, I have mentioned in my paper, in the settlements of Urayur, hinterland center, there is more evidence for local impact. In the case of coastal towns, we find external factors. So we could see both these factors contributing to the development of urbanization. Definitely, I feel the external factor and connectivity is where one important factor, not necessarily Ganga Valley, the entire South Asia, as the entire South Asia and Sri Lanka. And the second level, the connections with the West and the Southeast Asia, mainly the trade route. Probably you see things shifting from 1st century BC. See, early historic is a vast period, say 5th century BC to 300 CE. We cannot see this as one phase. We see multiple segments, and especially in 1st century BC, late 1st century BC, we see a lot of developments happening and then decline. So we should see a set of complex factors, internal as well as external, contributing to the developments.
Okay. Anurup Tantri wants to know, particularly you Brahmins, but he wants to know, is there any evidence of, or are there any references to Aryanization in Sangam literature?
No, I didn't get.
Are there any references? Are there any references, or do we see any evidence of Aryanization in Sangam literature?
No, we cannot say Aryanization. That term itself is problematic in that context. We do get evidence of certain concepts certain concept in Sangam literature. They no doubt. We get evidence for Sanskritization as such, mainly from the 5th, 6th century, mainly with the Pallava rules. But definitely, South India was well connecting with North India. You have evidence of Sramanas. That is very obvious. You get names like Dhamma and all that in those Tamil Brahmi shelters. I mentioned 50% of the names are Prakrit. So 50% of the names are Prakrit, as pointed out by both Subbarayalu and Airavada Mahadevan. So obviously people were coming. That is also highlighted in the literature. It is not only Aryanization, it is broader connectivity and, ideas, people were coming, and you do find traces of concepts like Himayam is frequently spoken. Nandas, Mauryas, all these ideas were there, definitely. So that connectivity existed very clearly. We cannot call it Aryanization in that period, but these concepts became predominant in the mainly from 5th, 6th century. And even if you look at Indra and all certain gods of the of the Thinais, they are also there. So we have evidence of Rajasuya Meta Pirnal Kili. A particular Choda king performed Rajasuya. There were Brahmins. They are also described in the literature. Obviously, you get a reference to all these groups in the Sangam literature. There is no doubt about it. Yes. And also Artha Sastra talks about the cloth from Madurai and also Pandya Kavadaka. So this connectivity did exist, and we need to study this more, especially understanding Prakrit. So because we are into this old notion of Aryan and Dravidian, and we are not able to really understand the meaning of Prakrit term. It is not necessary if somebody is having Prakrit name that this person came from outside. It is very complex. We have the name. So people also adopt the name nowadays. People find it fashionable, and they adopt names. You will never know whether this person is from there or who. We are in dark actually in some of the areas. But the Prakrit names, Prakrit as a language, I think need to be very studied. In the Ashokan inscription also, it's very clearly mentioned about Choda, Pandya, and Satyaputro, Kerala Putro.
Right.
So this connection has been there. Yes.
Jaya wants to know, and a few others as well, in what ways is Tamil Brahmi different from the Brahmi used, say, in Ashokan inscriptions?
See, this Brahmi, mainly this characters like Ra, Na, Ra, some of these characters are very typical. And this particular names that are occurring in this Brahmi characters, these names are also found in Sangam literature, some of these terms. That is why it is called as Tamil Brahmi, because we have in Sanskrit these Varga characters. In Tamil, we don't pronounce Akakaga, all that variation. So here we have a different kind of system. We do find a lot of similarity. And some of the words like Dhamma, sometimes they have used this Ashokan Da in some of the inscriptions. So we do find a clear relationship. I feel it is a material. Sometimes we go on arguing about how the script should be called. There are a lot of controversies going on, and also with regard to the origin of Brahmi, I think it is a very complex issue. There is one theory which says that it originated in Sri Lanka. There is another theory that it originated in Tamil Nadu. There is one which says that it was brought from northern India by traders. I think it is too early to say, but definitely there is a possibility that there was a script that existed before Ashoka. I would say that we need to excavate these sites. Sometimes our analysis is limited to one or two C14 or radiocarbon dates. We need to analyze the entire material cultural assemblage. Another problem is that many of these archaeological sites, things are moving. So we need to, the amount of dates, see radiocarbon dates we have for archaeological sites are very limited. So the idea brought out by Professor Rajan that there could be pre-Ashokan Brahmi or Tamil Brahmi, that can be even from Kiridi. It could be taken as a hypothesis, and further research needs to be done, more controlled excavations at many sites. And same way, mainly in the sites of Tamil Nadu, we find a lot of evidence for script. So maybe more sites by excavating by analyzing the entire material cultural assemblage like beads and other material, we'll be able to come up with a kind of comparative chronology. Not only C14 dates, C14 dates sometimes, again, they are influenced by site formation process. So we need to reconstruct the entire, assemblages to understand this. But generally, I wouldn't, focus much on, naming the script or renaming the script. Rather, I would suggest to, excavate more sites, mainly try to understand the Iron Age cultural development. We have not really worked on understanding the early Iron Age settlements. We have excavated a lot of burials. We really do not know much about the Iron Age and Neolithic Iron Age transition. And also, if you look at the cornelian beads that are found in the megalithic burials abundantly, they clearly suggest that the connection with Gujarat were very strong. People were getting raw material. So the raw material for some of the beads are not available locally. Same way, the connection with Southeast Asia was very strong. But we are not able to, get into this or, break into the pre-300 BCE time period. So we need to undertake more research, more settlements. Currently, we have very few dates, very few settlements. Maybe if we get a settlement, so the thing is getting into the right settlement where we have these, materials. So these questions cannot be answered in a 1 year or 2 years. Sometimes it may take 50 years of research. But we are all curious to know, and also in the writing of history, it is not only that so-called objective view. There are so many other factors and interests. That also comes behind. People want to find answers and see things that are close to their heart or close to their mind. But as professionals working, so we are trying to sort of dig information, and we say that we need to work more. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Aruni has a question. I will just read this out. He says the lecture was full of glorifications. So how was the prosperous society, or how was the state, how come it was destroyed by the Kalabras? What made the Kalabras invade? How was this prosperous society destroyed by the Kalabras? And so
there was no destruction. Actually, that was the age of. See, this is again an old notion. It was not something kind of verification. It is a kind of presentation of the material culture that was found and the narration in the literature. So we cannot say that there was no poverty. There is a clear evidence of poverty. Especially the Panas. There were also frequent fights going on. So the idea of Kalapura, the Dark Age, I wouldn't say that this was a kind of invasion. So again, this was exaggerated and built on the evidence from the this particular Velvikudi copper plate. Which talks about Kalapirarannum Kaliyarasar. I wouldn't say that this was some kind of invasion and society was destroyed. What I see is after especially 2nd or 3rd century, there was a decline in trade. So when you look at these settlements, till 1st century, 2nd century AD, we find a lot of activities, people coming. These urban centers, they flourish. And then probably in my view, these production centers dissipated. What happens, these production centers like metal production, copper production, they probably moved to the secondary centers. So as a result, what is known as deurbanization or something, it is not some kind of destruction. That is a layman's view of looking at things. That's what people say, how this makes Harappa, how was it, destroyed? We talk about fall. So it was a kind of process in which kind of decline happened. This problem arises because we look at history mostly by imagination. If you look at the process, because I have traveled in the coastal area, ate the hotels. So you see what is the life like in a normal kind of coastal area. What happens suddenly there is an activities, so if you understand, to understand the coastal landscape, this is one of my argument. In order to understand Sangam literature, not only literature or archaeology is enough, you have to go and see the village landscape. Can you read and understand Indian history by sitting in an AC room by 20 books? Unless you understand ethnography as a methodology, how people live. Because I have seen, traveled in the coastal areas, you do not get ceramics, you do not get even good quality pottery. Even for our excavation, you have to go to the hinterland centers, because there are not many productions in the coastal settlements in an ordinary time, unless if there is a kind of activities. This is what we see. What happened to Trangamadi? Was it destroyed? The process changed. What happened to Nahapattinam? Nahapattinam was a key center. Southern Railway workshop was there. They had lot of problem. They shifted Nahapattinam focus. Initially, just the missionaries were there. They shifted everything from Nahapattinam to Tiruchirappalli. Nahapattinam could never grow. The same way in Tiruvarur, now the railways have a problem filling good drinking water. So this is a process that is happening. Unless you understand how a contemporary society functions, how ethnography works, how material culture works in the contemporary life, you cannot reconstruct the past. This is my experience from looking at the text and the inscriptions. I have looked at the inscriptions, try to understand, but some of the knowledge that I gained from my father who was a farmer, it helped me to interpret the information found in the inscription. Otherwise, anybody who is not, I'm not trying to put this particular argument. My strong argument is there are fundamental problems with our university syllabi. So we have fragmented knowledge. We think, at least in some of the contexts, archaeology is different, folklore is different, ethnography is different, anthropology is different, and literature is something, no, that is too exaggeration, and epigraphy is different, numismatic. This kind of fragmentation, the problem lies with the university syllabus. So this is where we need to have a different kind of perception. So with regard to Kalapras, I think it was not a dark age, it was a change in process as it happened with the decline of like Tranquebar or any of the settlements, the processes are changing. So probably after the decline of the trade, the production centers from a larger conglomerate, they shifted to the small regional centers. So we do get a lot of evidence, especially that's what I argue. 3rd and 4th century CE, they cannot be considered as something a decline. This was an old notion in which scholars had a problem that 3rd century CE as a bracket and everything declined. This is something very problematic. And when we look at this particular period, we have evidence for predominance of Jain, especially if you look at Tirukural, a lot of these texts, didactic texts, and they talk about ideal life and all that. So probably we have different kind of change, and from you get a lot of forms. Actually, Rajan Gurukal has analyzed it beautifully, especially the transformation of these period. You can see it. So what I was presenting is mainly the urban center. So we cannot, the notion of Calabras invading, and same way like these people invasions, that was a notion constructed earlier. We cannot say that this kind of invasion, it was a transformation. We have evidence of activities, 4th, 5th century coins and amphoras of 4th century, 5th century found at Adakanpulam, Torpedojor, but they are limited in number. So the settlements attain, different kind of. So this is something to do with the broader change in the Afro-Eurasian world, or what we can call systems theory, in which the broader changes have an impact. This is very clear. If you look at the material culture, a lot of activities were happening, and we see a gradual decline. Yes.
Okay. A decline in trade also. with
Yeah, right.
Okay. So one last question. There are lots of questions for you actually, but since we don't have so much
Okay,
time,
yeah.
and so many people have said excellent lecture, I wish we had more time with you, and I wish there was a second lecture. Anyway, one last question. Since this is, we are based in Bangalore, could you say a little bit about, do the descriptions in Sangam literature also, do you think they describe some of the sites in Karnataka, particularly southern Karnataka? Would they hold good for that as well?
Yes, yes, definitely. See, because we have references to Katti, they say, Katti definitely talks about that region also. Conventionally, this Tamil Nadu also, in the sense from Vengadam Hills, and also some part of Karnataka also, we do definitely references. So we have to be very clear that we are talking about the time which is about 1,700 years ago. So it was entirely a kind of different kind of things. A lot of changes have happened. And if you, another point of mine is, if you want to understand the Sangam text, it is not only Tamil knowledge is important, you also need Malayalam knowledge. That is very important. Same way, Andhra, Telugu, and also Kannada languages, knowing all the southern Indian languages, and Prakrit, that is also very important. That's what my impression is. So we get also references to this Himayam or Himalaya so frequently. Sometimes that could be a kind of poetic, exaggeration. Again, I also agree with the view that we cannot take the poems, directly. Poems also have their own exaggeration. But when we use it for history, we can cull out some information. Mainly, the settlement of Ambar Kiran is mentioned, and Nangur Vale is mentioned in the literature text. So we go to the same settlement. So my research tried to correlate looking at the inscription, contemporary names as existed today, and also the literature talks about the geography. Arisil, it talks about Arisil, Hidar, Arisil River, Arasalar is still today. We get the same river, same landscape in the medieval inscription. So you go by the contemporary name, look into the medieval inscriptions, then look into Sangam literature, then we go to the same site. We also look at Devaram name mentioned in Devaram literature, Devaram text, they also have similar names mentioned in the Sangam literature. Then you undertake archaeology, right? So by using this, we can, try to go closer to the reality. There is no way that we can argue that, the past can be understood 100%. At least we can try to go closer to the reality. So in that, actually, what is the kind of urban process, how we can look at the evidence very cynically, or we can look at either in a glorified manner, or we can look at the things in a middle path. So what Wheeler or other people presented, actually there is a paper by Sharma and D.N. Jha, review in Jesho in 1974 or something, in which they try to analyze this economic history of India, in which they say the views, how it changed from the colonial times, Wheeler's time, and later on. Rajan Gurukal also talks about the concept of balance of payment, how nationalist thought influence. So Wheeler even also tried to compare some of the Nilgiri settlements and the colonial occupation. He tried to draw a parallel for the Neolithic kind of settlements, Iron Age evidence coming into the Neolithic. So here Wheeler presented a view that the colonial kind of view, in which in the Roman trade, local people would not have taken an active part. But when we look at the archaeological evidence, we get Prakrit evidence, Prakrit inscription, Tamil inscription. If you take the case of Bernike, you get inscriptions of all those languages. Where are the Greek inscription or Latin inscription? Tamil Nadu. We don't have any Greek or Latin inscription on ceramics. Why? So obviously these people, Indians, were acting as a kind of intermediaries in these long distance trade. And we find with these excavations of Bernike in the 1990s and also the finds, in a sense, places the role of Indians in these maritime trade. Again, if you look at these Tamil inscriptions in Southeast Asia, and also the Chinese inscription in Galle, found in Galle. So you definitely find the Tamil, some of the Tamil traders taking an active part because of the geographical location. Tamil Nadu as well as in Kerala, located in the southern tip. It was easy to cross when you take, when you move from Red Sea region and then cross. In fact, Sri Lanka has more maritime evidence, more connection than the southern part of Tamil Nadu or southern part of India. So because of its strategic location. So probably that strategic location gave importance. In addition to that, there are also historical factors why history was given more importance. Could be associated, and focusing on a particular region in history is something to do with the socio-economic context of that particular region. For example, Tamil Nadu, the development of socio-economic context, and then development from the 19th century, late 19th century, had a great impact on what is being researched and what is understood. Probably that kind of factor. If you go to Kerala, there is not much of interest on the ancient history. There is more interest on the medieval. So these kind of factors also matter. I don't know about the historiography of Andhra or Karnataka very much. So probably there were different kinds of processes working and influencing history writing. So now we have come to a different kind of age, in the age of social media, but what is happening in Black Lives Matter. So that is going to give a very new kind of perspective. So we should see these development from a complex, socio-economic factors and also political factors influencing how a particular community looks at history. But again, as historians, as archaeologists coming from specific community, I think we need to be more professional and to move away from these kind of influences, which also requires a kind of deconstruction, which is very complex. It is not easy, and that is why in Indian history written by Indians, or Tamil Nadu history written by Tamilians and non-Tamilians, Indian history written by non-Indians, so they try to present a kind of view, how people view five so-called physically, visually challenged people looking at elephant. That is how history progresses, right?
Well,
I think I took more time.
That's fine.
Maybe if
That's
people
fine.
have questions, they can write to me.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can do that. But I like the note on which you ended, sir. And also in your previous answer, you had spoken about how we really should not, currently in universities, things are divided into different disciplines. And one of the reasons we, Smriti and I, NIAS and INTACH have organized this lecture is to sort of blur these divisions between these disciplines. So it's really nice that you also brought it around to the same concept here. So thank you, sir, for a really, really wonderful, enlightening trip through vast fields of history and archaeology and sociology and literature. All of it combined so beautifully to make this beautiful, beautiful story. So thank you so much. And I really do hope that we can have more time with you at some future time as well. Some more talks, some more interactions. Thank you very, very much. I would also take a moment to thank all of you in the audience, and also tell you a little bit about the talk tomorrow. Tomorrow we have two speakers, Carol Upadhyay and Smriti Haricharan, from both from NIAS, and they will also be speaking about urbanization. In both, Smriti will speak a little bit about Kirdi, and Carol will speak a little bit about Bangalore. So that should be also very interesting. So thank you once again, sir, and thank all of you for being here. And I hope to see you all tomorrow as well. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.